Hi everyone, Kelly Bear here, and I'm actually pre-recording a video on my laptop rather than just going live because I felt like it would be better to actually record this properly rather than, you know, just doing a live on the fly, because this is a video I've been meaning to make actually probably for quite a while, because I have had people ask me about it in the past, and that's, you'll see from the title, how to use the Mildred Payne Secret Pocket Oracle by Patrick Valenza as a Lenormand. And as I've said before, with regards to this oracle deck, I read it in the style of a Lenormand. I don't do grand tableaus with it because there are a lot more cards in this deck than there are in a regular Lenormand. But if I do like 9 card, sort of the 9 card portrait, I will lay them out and in 3 by 3 and read them in looking down at my table and imagining a nine cards in front of me. But you know, the way that you would read a Lenormand portrait or 9 card box spread. So you're looking at the pairs, the corners, diagonally, knighting, crowning, all that kind of stuff. That's how I read the Mildred Payne. But you can also use the Mildred Payne as a Lenormand, as in, like, there are cards that correspond, if not completely directly, there are cards that can sort of be substituted, and often there's a number of cards that could be used to substitute depending on your mood or your taste. So I thought what I would do is just show you the cards that, if I'm using this as a Lenormand, which cards I use in replacement for a regular Lenormand. I've got the Piatnik one here, which is my most recent purchase. It's very, very cheap. I think it cost me about £5. And this is what I've been using exclusively for the last couple of weeks, and I'm really enjoying having this. Is my first like truly classic Lenormand. I do wish it did have more people cards, because it does have only 36, which means 1 man and 1 woman. So obviously it's not great if you want to do same-sex readings, whether that is a same-sex relationship with regards to a romantic relationship, or even same-sex as in a woman asking about her boss and her boss is a woman. So I think it's really restrictive just having 1 man and 1 woman. But of course this is a very old system. It goes back to the 1800s, and so therefore it's not as it doesn't stretch to today's standards of inclusivity. There are modern decks that do. There are modern decks that don't, which I'm just like, why? I've had a rant about this in my last live chat. Like, why in today's climate would you not just put at least 1 woman and 1 man extra? Preferably a couple of ungendered cards as well, because, you know, non-binary people exist, right? Genderqueer people exist. But also not just because it's to do with same-sex relationships and marriages, but same-sex as in, like I said, bosses, friends. You might be asking about a family member, you might be asking about a sister or a brother, someone who's the same sex as you, same gender as you. So I think it's just helpful. And I know that people will say, well, there are other cards that can relate to people in the deck. So some people say that you can use the fox to represent a red-headed woman. Or you could, but then the fox has a lot of negative connotations as well. I try to read the fox as a bit more neutral, and to also have that clever and sort of mischievous quality, a bit more sort of a fun quality to the fox, rather than just a sly and sneaky quality to it. Some people read the fox as really underhand. And then some people say, well, you can use, if it's a same-sex relationship, you can use the snake to refer to another woman. Again, I actually find that quite offensive. If you are if you have a lesbian coming to you, or a bisexual woman that is in a same-sex relationship, or wants to is looking to ask a question about a same-sex relationship, and then you just go, oh well, we'll just use the snake, which in itself usually has negative connotations. It's like, it's not great, right? So you know, the bear can represent a strong sort of motherly figure, or again a boss. but I think it's nice to it removes that card from its original meaning if you're using it as a significator. And I know some cards can be charged within a reading to a specific question, but I think if you're doing a grant a blow with regards to a question, I think it's nice to have the actual significators. Anyway, so that was like a little side thing that I wasn't actually planning to talk about, but there we go. I went on a little side quest as always. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip, well, I'm not going to flip the camera down because I am talking at my laptop. I'm going to get my trusty old phone and set it up on my old little what's this called, the thing that I've got my microphone on at the moment, but will now be having my phone on, and I will try and get some decent footage. The light's really bad, it's a really grey day, so the lighting might not be great, but we'll give it a go. If not, I might have to try and film this face on. I was going to say downstairs at the kitchen table, but my husband is having a work meeting at the moment, and I don't want to be him. We'll both be hearing each other because the living room's next to the kitchen pretty much. So anyway, what's it called? Pandemic working situations. So yeah, I am going to get off here, and well, again, like I say, by the magic of editing, you'll be looking down at these two decks, and I'll show you what I do with these this Mildred Payne. Okay, so here we are with our two decks, with our classic Lenormand. I'll just show you the box for the actual Lenormand. It's just the Piatnik Mademoiselle Lenormand. It's got this on the back, so the back's quite pretty. The box for the Mildred Payne Secret Pocket Oracle, I have like away somewhere. I have like all my tuck boxes taken down and put in a box of boxes because I tend to keep them in little drawstring pouches or in my own little handmade pouches, so I don't usually have don't always have the box, not always, but here we go. Anyway, so that's by the by. So here you can see we've got the rider. I'm hoping the glare isn't going to be too much. Ugh. Same old problem I always have. I've worked out that having a white background seems to help. My phone likes that more. But we have the rider, which means sort of messages and news or a visitor. And the card that you can use for the rider can be the oraculum, because it's news or a message, and the other one that I feel like you can use is the ear, because listening out for a message, just keep an ear out for some news. Then we have the Clover, which means small luck. Usually I'm not going to go into the full depth of all the bazillions of meanings and the German tradition and the French tradition. I'll just give the very brief, like quick, like overview just to explain why I've chosen which cards as substitutes when there isn't a direct correlation in this deck. So the Clover is small luck. I've used the wheel, like the turning of the wheel, the changing of luck, the wheel of fortune almost feel from the tarot for that. We don't have a boat in the Mildred Payne, but we do have some sort of oceanic themed cards. We have water, which would be an option, but I think that the two that would work for me is either the octopus, because I think of the Kraken, you know, taking the ship down with it, so it makes me think of high seas and adventures, so the ship is like movement or long distance travel, or you could use the shell if you want a slightly less Lovecraftian reference for your ship card. And I'm sharing this because lots of people said they want to learn Lenormand, but they don't have a Lenormand, but they do have the Mildred Payne. So this is a way of doing that, or it's a way of giving you a spooky style Lenormand. There are spooky Lenormand decks out there, though, you know. So I'm trying to get the light just right, but it's really tricky. But also I would say if you are learning Lenormand, it helps to have an original one, because you do have the actual official numbering, and you know, even better if you've got the card inserts, because you can use the card inserts to represent people again, and you have directionality and stuff like that. So but that's sort of more sort of advanced reading. So we have the house and the house, so that works really perfectly. You don't have to substitute anything there. The tree and the tree, But you could also, if you want a more spooky version, you could go with the stump for this one, which is if you're like, you know, wanting to also, maybe you are a Lenormand reader, and you don't have a spooky deck, but you might be doing Lenormand readings for a spooky event or for Halloween, and you're like, oh well, you can pull out some of these cards and still read it as a Lennie if you want like an actual spooky looking deck. Again, there are Halloween and spooky themed and gothic themed Lenormand decks out there, but I just thought this is a little fun thing, and people have asked me in the past, because I did mention it and then I said I would make a video about it, which I'm really bad for doing. I'll say I'll make a video about something and then I forget, or I just don't get around to it. So for clouds, I have storm. It's pretty self-explanatory. Obviously here we have the dark and the light, which is really helpful, whereas this, it's sort of, you know, you don't really have that. But not all classic Lennies have a light and a dark side to the clouds, so it's not the end of the world. Snake and snake, so that's pretty, you know, straightforward. For the coffin, I use a skull because there is no coffin in this one, which is weird. You'd think that there would be a coffin in a Patrick Valenza little deck. Although now I'm thinking of a really excellent card in the Mildred Payne Oracle of Black Enchantment, which involves a coffin, which is very funny. But yeah, so I use the skull because, you know, the endings and death. For the bouquet, I use the flower. For the scythe, I use the axe. You could, of course, also use maybe the shovel because you're like digging, reaping. I guess you could also use the shovel for the coffin. I'd never really thought about that, like digging a grave. Never really thought about that before. For the scourge and the broom, we have a scourge and we have a broom. There's also a pitchfork, which I thought would be quite a fun one to use for like prodding people's bums for pleasure or pain, I guess. Depends what you're into, right? I'm not yucking anyone's yum. So there's that. For the birds, I use the owl, and some of the traditional decks also have owls on them. I think the blue owl Lenormand does have an owl in the birds card. But there's also a dove, so you could use a dove if you'd rather not use an owl. For the child, fetus, new beginnings. There's no fox in the Mildred Payne, so the devil, and again I know I was just talking about negative connotations, but with regards to this deck, it's the only way that I could come about. And actually my view of the devil is that sort of trickster and mischievous. It doesn't have to be really dark and sort of evil, you know. Think of Lucifer, the TV show, and think of Lucifer as portrayed in that that kind of feel, I guess. For the bear, again, there's no bear in the Mildred Payne, so dragon for me works for power and strength and protection, that kind of thing. The star is the stars, so that's fine. For stork, there's no stork. I guess maybe you could use one of the other birds and mix it out, but I think for me that would get a bit confusing. So the stork can represent, you know, like children and stuff like that, but it can also represent long distance and change, changes something that comes up, and it has some similarities with the ship, but for me more so like change because of that migration, I guess, and change of scenery. So for me the moth works because it's goes from being a caterpillar to a pupa or a chrysalis to a moth, right? So that works. But conversely, you could also use the frog for the same thing because you get that change and that transformation with the tadpole, the spawn, the tadpole, and then the frog, and so on. There's no dog, but there is a cat. Pretty self-explanatory. And some modern Lenormand decks actually offer a dog and a cat card to mean the same thing, just for people who might be more of a dog person or a cat person. I mean, I think cats are fine. You know, I don't mind cats at all. But I've always been more of a dog person. I think that's just because I grew up with dogs. My mum's allergic to cats, so we could never actually have cats. So that one to me is just pretty self-explanatory. For the tower, I use the lighthouse because it's a tower, but you could conversely, again, you could also use the factory because the tower can sometimes represent an establishment or a place of work. It does sort of start to then narrow down the meaning again, but if you were doing a reading using this deck with regards to work or an establishment, then maybe you would want to use this over this, you know. Again, you can just take it, put in and take out what cards you want for each reading, right? That's the beauty of it. Then for the garden, I use the mushroom. Let me explain. Mushroom, fungi, have a lot more going on than we can see on the surface. So mushrooms, fungi will be linked up underground by a mycelial network, and they communicate with each other, and that links in with the trees in, if it's in a woodlands or forest or whatever, and that also, it's like there's a symbiosis going on there, and it's a community, right? And so garden is community and gatherings and socials, events, that kind of thing. So for me, mushroom works because there's that network. Obviously it's underground, but then you also have this plants. Well, it's not a plant, it's a fungi. It's not a plant, it's a different thing. Fungi and plants are not the same thing. But you know what I mean? It's like a growing I don't want to say non-mammalian, because then obviously you have reptiles and birds and fish. But you know what I mean? It doesn't get up and walk. So it makes me think of gardens. Oh, this has gotten mixed up. So we've got the mount. I'll put that aside and bring that out in a second. Oh no, that was it. It's not mixed up. It's because it is the garden. Sorry. Oh my god, my brain. I don't use this, but when I was going through the cards again, just to have a double check, I also realised that the bee. I've never used this in a reading to represent garden, but I think the bee could work for garden. Because of that, again, that social thing where the bees, they gather the pollen and information, and they go back to the hive and they communicate. So, and there's that like the gathering of the hive. But I also was like, oh, but this could also work for the birds, because again, it's that gathering the information and sort of relaying that communication, right? Oh, sorry, I'm not. I said I was going to talk about what all the cards mean, and then I didn't. Sorry. For the mountain, the iceberg, it's a blockage or a challenge to overcome. So that to me is pretty self-explanatory. The crossroads or the ways, the arrow, just because it's pointing somewhere, you know, where will the arrow land? For me, that works. For the mice, I use the rat. Again, it's a pretty much 1-for-1 on that. I just love how like angry this rat looks. God, the lighting. For the heart, we have the heart. Obviously, this is a much more sort of anatomical sort of looking heart. Oh my god, my lighting is bobbins. So yeah, that's again pretty self-explanatory. For the ring, I use diamond because I think of diamond ring. So it's just all a word association. Book and book. So you see, some of them are just straight up sort of 1-for-1, like for like, right? Now for the, again, this is a tricky one. For the letter, which means communication or a contract, not a contract, that's the ring, or documents, sorry. I use the crow because I think of crows. Therefore, I then also think ravens because corvids, and then I think of Game of Thrones, and I think send a raven for communication, and those ravens travelling with the little scrolls attached. So for me, that's my word association. Your mileage may vary on that. You might prefer maybe the ear that I had shared for the rider, or you might prefer something else. But I do have another option, which is the trumpet, which again makes me think of some kind of message being announced. But this would usually refer to written communication and documents and things like that. But again, your mileage may vary. That's why this one works better for me. I don't use this one, but it was one that I was like, oh, when I was, like I said, going through the cards to see if I could come up with other examples for people who might not like the ones that I use, just giving you other examples. So for the man, I have the boy. For the woman, I have the girl. For the lilies, I use the herb, and that's purely because there's no other plant. There's the rose, right, which I use for the bouquet, and this I use the herb. Obviously, the meaning of the lilies will depend on whether you use the French system or the German system. I tend to skew towards the French tradition, even though technically it seems that Lenormand is actually a German system. I just yeah, I just don't get why you would call lilies sex to make them mean like maturity and old age and long time and all that kind of thing. Makes more sense to me. I don't know, but that's just how I've been reading. The sun, again, like for like, is the sun. So I've just sat down because my back's hurting. The moon is the moon. The key is the key. Nice and straightforward for a lot of these ones now coming up. The fish is the fish. I love Patrick Valenza's artwork. Look at this fish. Now this is again another deviation. So you can have for the anchor, which is sort of it can mean stability, a long time, steadfastness, all sorts of things. You could use the shield for sort of. Some people say that it means protection. Again, it depends on the tradition that you follow. So I'd say the shield works, but the one that I use is the bone, and that's for me because the bones, they're right in you. They're what pin your body. That's what gives your body substance, is your, not your substance, but you know, your stability, your bones, your skeleton. So for me, the bone really works for the anchor, just for sort of that mind association. Word association. For the cross, I use the Unk because it's a kind of cross, and I like that it's not a sort of Christianized version of a cross. Some modern Lenormands will use an equal sided cross rather than a traditional sort of Christian cross, and some will use like those really old Celtic crosses with the round bit and then the bits coming out. It's like the one that's in the Celtic Lenormand, you know, I can't really ever remember what those crosses are actually called. And then there's some other like options for people cards. There's probably more in the deck, but these were the main ones I come up with. Now there's the hag because it's a person, right? So although I don't know how happy people would be with being referred to a hag, but the option is there, right? The other one could be poppet because people use poppets. I mean, I use poppets to represent myself. I have poppets of myself from my own magical work, but obviously you can use poppets to mean other people, so that works as a non-gendered person card. And blood would work, and I have used this for readings for family members because blood, they're related. So yeah, that is how I utilize this as a Lenormand. Although, like I said, I've been just only using this one the last couple of weeks since I got it. I'm liking it, although I would like those 2 extra at least cards, people cards, because it would just be better. I am looking for I literally want a deck like this Piatnik, or the Dondorf, or the Blue Owl, or the Lenormand Oracle. This kind of vintage artwork with the inserts, with the number, with just the classic size, with the white border and a nice back, with at least 1 extra man and woman card, because people have been very kindly offering suggestions, but you know, they're not. I'm very specifically looking for this kind of artwork, and people are going, but you need to make your own one then. I'm like, I do not have the bandwidth to start another project. And I was trying to find imagery, like what do you call it, like what's the word, royalty free, not royalty free, and that's music, you know, images that you can use for free, but I don't know, maybe I'm looking in the wrong place, or you can join websites or buy images separately. I'm like, oh god, it'd be so expensive just to make a bloody deck, and then I'm not good with like computers, graphic-y scanning. I don't know what I'm fucking doing. I'm a hands-on creator. I'm a crafter. I'm an arts and crafter. I'm not a digital worker. I don't work in digital medium, so it's not something I would know how to do anyway. Not now, at least, not at the moment. Yeah, I ain't nobody got time for that. I don't have time for that. I have limited energy as it is with my illnesses. My time is my time where I feel okay to actually do stuff is still pretty limited, if I'm being honest. So yeah, waffle. I hope you enjoyed that. Let me know, do you use this the Mildred Payne as a Lenormand, or do you have it and you're now intrigued because you already read Lenormand but hadn't thought to use this as a Lenormand? Like I said, I will also use this and shuffle all the cards in and read the deck as itself, but in the style of Lenormand, and it works just as great. So yeah, that's that. I am waffling and stuff, so I'm gonna go. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Ciao.